So this story takes place a long time ago on some islands far, far away. Okay, we're going back to 1778. There was a British sailor named Captain James Cook who was sailing around the Pacific Ocean with a few of his men. He's looking for different lands that the British Empire could colonize. Now, James was actually looking for Australia when he came across a beautiful tropical paradise. It was untouched by colonization. It turns out this place James had landed on was a series of islands known as the Kingdom of Hawaii. Captain James received a warm welcome from the islanders because their mothers raised them right, and also because it was Makahiki, which was a time of celebration and peace. At the time, Hawaii had two seasons, peace season and war season. The seasons were determined by their harvesting calendar. Basically, during the rainy season, war and fighting was forbidden so that the land could be nourished and undisturbed to help for the next year's harvest. So the first time James was there, it was like no fighting time. No fighting, right? James was not a very good house guest, and he took advantage of their hospitality. When James left the Kingdom of Hawaii, he would tell his friends on the ship that the people of Hawaii considered him a god, and he couldn't wait to return to settle the land there. Which is kind of a weird thing to say about a place that's already settled with thousands of years of history, but sure, James, sure. James ran into some crazy storms, and his ship ended up getting damaged, and he had to, turn back around. By the time James returned to the islands, it was no longer the season of peace, and the Hawaiian people were not going to put up with his shit this time. James wasn't used to being told no, and when Hawaiians refused his demands, James started fights with the local chiefs and burned down people's homes. In retaliation, the people of Hawaii stole one of James' rowboats, and James was very upset about this. He's like, how could they do this to me? I am a god to these people. So James gets his men together and kidnaps many of the women in the villages, as well as the Hawaiian king, to use as a bargaining chip. From here, all hell breaks loose. At one point in the battle, a Hawaiian chief named Kanaina grabbed James from behind, and it was just pure chaos all around. And it was all over a frickin' rowboat. That's what they're fighting over. Kanaina and another chief ended up killing Captain James in defense during the violent clash. Well, as you can imagine, it pissed off Captain James's soldiers, and they decided to retaliate. Now, eventually, the fighting died down and everybody went their separate ways. Even though Captain James had pulled all that shit, the Hawaiian people still wanted to be diplomatic about his death. So they ended up giving him a traditional burial on the islands and gave his soldiers some of his bones so that they could do a burial at sea. The Hawaiians weren't intimidated by Europe or England, but they wanted to have a good relationship with them. They didn't want anything bad to happen. Even though the Hawaiians successfully fought off James and his men, they didn't stop others from trying to get a piece of Hawaii for themselves. Hawaii was a paradise full of riches that everyone wanted to get their hands on, and this will be a reoccurring theme. So by 1791, a king by the name of Kamehameha, I'm so sorry, I know I got that wrong, Kamehameha, no disrespect, ascended to the throne. He was a well-liked king because he always said he cared for the Hawaiian people first and foremost, but also he had an eye towards the future. You see, Kamehameha knew that there were outsiders coming, and not only was Hawaii on a trade route, it was full of money-making potential, from fertile farmlands to pearls to whales that could be killed for oil. I mean, the possibilities were endless. And not only this, but missionaries were making their rounds as well. One thing the British realized while they were living on Hawaiian land was how easy it was to grow sugarcane, which was a hot commodity. Other than being where sugar comes from, sugarcane's used for all sorts of stuff. I mean, from baking bread to making alcohol, So they set up huge plantations all over the place and started growing this stuff, and it sold like crazy. Suddenly, the sugar industry was exploding and attracting people from all parts of the globe. Because money, money. Of course, you get it, money. So instead of constantly being at war with the outsiders, the king decided to treat them with respect and let them live on their land. But that's not how the outsiders saw it. They took it to mean that Hawaiians had given them the land, and in doing so, given them control. And things would stay like this for a while. And And over time, the colonizers positioned themselves to take the land out from under the Hawaiians. The king had started to notice some of the shady planning these guests were putting into place. So in 1840, in order to maintain control, the new Hawaiian king decided to change the way Hawaii was run. Now, he modeled the new system on the United States Congress. So this king is doing everything he can to preserve peace and make sure they don't lose their power to outside forces, because people are coming trying to snatch shit up, okay? So now there's this new congressional system in place that occupiers in Hawaii see a way to have even more say in the government. They had already shown their influence by doing things like banning hula dancing in Hawaii. Yeah. And not just hula dancing, a lot of traditional Hawaiian culture was also forbidden, which makes absolutely no sense. Even the Hawaiian language started getting banned in schools. But the occupiers wanted more than simply banning things. A lot of these occupiers were from the United States, so they started to send letters back to the U.S. government saying stuff like, hey, hi, how's it going? What's up? Nothing much here. We should try and figure out a way to take this land. There's a ton of resources out here and we can make a lot of money. So the occupiers asked for a sit-down meeting with the king, and they had a proposition. They proposed to the king that Hawaii become part of the United States. They told the king if Hawaii was part of the U.S., the military would be able to protect them from occupation. Oh, but wait, wasn't the United States military currently the ones doing the occupying? The king considers this, but because he cared about preserving the independence of Hawaii and its culture, he says, thanks, but we're good. We're doing just fine. Well, this does not go over so well with the occupiers, because they were only taking yes for an answer. Because as you've probably gathered from past episodes here in Dark History, when you tell a person no, especially in the 1800s, shit does not go over too well. No, it does not. So these occupiers did what occupiers do best when they don't get their way. They kick, they scream, they cry, and then they start screaming about corruption and told anyone who would listen that the government needed to change. So, to take care of this, the occupiers decided to create a secret society called the Hawaiian League. The Hawaiian League was focused on completely overthrowing the government and rebuilding it from the ground up. Some may even call this a coup, aka when people take over the government. Thank you. But there was one guy who really led the charge and became the worst thing to happen to Hawaii. Enter to the scene, Sanford B. Dole. But first, we're going to pause for an ad break. I'm going to get me what are those Dole whip things you get at Disneyland?
Harper Wilde is creating a more understand our cats' voices. And thanks to...
So let's talk about Sanford Dole. Mr. Dole. It sounds familiar, doesn't it? Well, he was born in Hawaii in 1844. Now, you may recognize the name Dole because of the Pineapple Company. Now, that wasn't Sanford, but the Pineapple Man was his cousin, small world, and Sanford did help his cousin a little. Anyway, Sanford's parents were American missionaries from Maine, and he grew up in Hawaii. Now, after attending college in the United States, Mr. Dole became a lawyer in Hawaii in 1868, which meant he had to give up his United States citizenship. Now, this is important to remember because from that point on, Sanford was legally a native Hawaiian. The original definition for Hawaiian is a nationality, not a race. It is short for Hawaiian subject, like American is short for American citizen. So this is how Sanford is a native Hawaiian, if that makes any sense. You get it. Which makes what he ends up doing even more backstabby. So while Sanford was studying to become a lawyer, he got introduced to an entirely different world than the one that he had grown up in. Suddenly, Sanford's meeting all these wealthy lawyers and plantation owners, and he starts hearing about the movement to have Hawaii become a U.S. territory. And he's like, oh my god, I love that for us, and I'm a native Hawaiian. This is so up my alley. So he decided to do whatever he can to help the movement. In the process, Sanford ends up running for and winning a spot in the Hawaiian government. So he is actually working directly under King Kalakaua. So sorry, but yes. If you remember from earlier, Sanford was a member of the super suspicious secret society, the Hawaiian League. Now again, their main